Thank you, Tim. I would like to start off by admitting that I am not a public speaker, and not only am I not a public speaker, but I'm currently taking a medication which causes dysphagia, which is the annoying side effect of causing me to occasionally drop words in the middle of a sentence or forget what I was saying in the middle of an incomplete thought. So I hope you'll bear with me and be able to appreciate my story even if the delivery isn't perfect. The truth is that I wouldn't have agreed to speak this evening if it wasn't for such an important cause. Even with the drugs that disconnect my brain from my mouth every so often, I appreciate being here. As Tim mentioned, I'm a dentist and a mother. Between work, teaching at the hospital, school, soccer, dance lessons, parenting, and family time, we have very busy lives. To say that adding a serious illness to the mix is inconvenient is an understatement. But my story began in the summer of 2002. I was having stress-like symptoms, racing heart, headaches, sweating. I didn't take my blood pressure during that period, but I'm sure it was elevated. I also didn't seek medical attention because I didn't think it was that serious, and I had a few things to attribute my symptoms to. That was the year Jason and I got married. We bought our first house, I bought a dental practice, and I got pregnant. It was a little stressful, but why not? In 2002, we believed we were in control of our destiny, and we could do anything we set our minds to. My pregnancy started out badly and got progressively worse. My head hurt all the time, I was sweating, and my blood pressure was rising at an alarming rate. My staff started scheduling fewer patients during the day because they later told me I was a strange shade of gray, and they were tired of hearing, "I'm fine," right before I ran to the bathroom to be sick. 7 weeks before my due date, when my blood pressure spiked to 250 over 150, my doctors decided they would have to deliver the baby. Although we had plane tickets to fly up to Canada for my brother's birthday that weekend, Although we had plane tickets to fly up to Canada for my brother's birthday that weekend, my beautiful daughter Drew was delivered by C-section at 33 weeks on June the 6th. We both survived. I went into shock during her delivery. Although we didn't know it at the time, I had an undiagnosed Pheo Gala. In hindsight, I've been told that if I had gone into labor, the chances of either one of us surviving would have been about 10%. It's so silly. We were concerned about the money we were losing on airplane tickets. We had no idea that my life or my baby's could have been in danger. But somehow, by the grace of God, after 2 weeks in the neonatal intensive care unit, we left the hospital, a family of 3. Even though the baby wasn't due until the end of July, we're fortunate enough to have the best family in the world. They dropped everything they had planned that summer and came to help. The next 6 weeks were chaos. We had a newborn, premature baby at home. Jason and I were both working full-time. Our parents were rotating through the house trying to help us hold it all together, and I was in and out of the emergency room with uncontrolled hypertension. Each trip to the emergency room would result in a hospital admission. We were doing our best, but we were really just shuffling forward in survival mode, making it one day at a time. Finally, on my last trip to the emergency room during that period, the physician that came to examine me had me sit up so he could listen to my heart and noticed that I was sweating. He decided to order a special blood test I hadn't had before and a CT scan. The following day, sitting in the hallway waiting for my CT scan, I peeked in my chart for just a second to see that he had suspected a PHEO. I had no idea what that was, so I called Jason at work and said, "Quick, Google PHEO." He keyed it in and started reading. Pheochromocytoma, a tumor, often benign, found on the adrenal glands, high mortality rate due to secondary hypertension, often misdiagnosed. That sounded right. Although the CT scan done at the hospital that day was normal, I went to see my GP 10 days later to get the results of the blood test. My norepinephrine came back over 10,000. Normal is 250. I finally had a diagnosis, pheochromocytoma. It was a huge relief to know what was wrong and to know that there was a solution. An end was in sight. Another CT scan was ordered, but surprisingly the CT scan came back normal again, nothing on the adrenals. An MRI was ordered, but it also showed nothing, so a special scan, the MIBG, was ordered. This will find it, they promised me, but nothing was there. It's impossible, they said, so the MIBG scan was repeated. Still nothing. The doctors were stumped. For another 6 weeks, scans were scheduled. I spent hours in waiting rooms, lying on cold, hard surfaces, sweating, instead of at work doing what I loved or at home with my new baby. By this time, we were all running out of steam at home. Our parents joked that they understood why people in their 60s didn't have babies, and Jason and I were just exhausted. So Jason got online again and started doing more research. Surely someone must know more about pheochromocytomas than my doctors in Charlotte who had scheduled me for a 4th round of MIBG scans. He discovered that the world's leader in Pheo research and publications was at NIH, Dr. Potzak. I was physically and emotionally worn out at that time, and I thought NIH was some kind of impenetrable ivory tower beyond my grasp. So my father-in-law, Colonel Brown, took over and contacted Dr. Potzak, who it turns out was very accessible and most gracious, and he asked for help. Within 10 minutes of speaking, Dr. Potzak asked simply, "Has anyone done an MRI for pelvis?" No. He suggested that be the next step, and if nothing was found, he would be available for further consultation. The next day, in an MRI machine in Charlotte, a 6-centimeter Pheo was found invading the wall of my bladder. 10 days later, it was removed, and the wall of my bladder reconstructed at Carolina's Medical Center. I spent 4 days in the hospital and was released on no medications with low blood pressure. The nightmare was over that quickly. Our lives returned to normal at lightning speed. 6 months later, when we had some perspective, we were able to look back objectively. We marveled at some of the close calls we had and laughed at some of the ridiculous things we endured just trying to survive. All of this took place during our first year of marriage. Talk about a rocky first year for Jason and I, not because, in my opinion, the most incredible man in this room isn't my husband, but because, wow, what a lot of obstacles for anyone to deal with, especially newlyweds. When I hear people say the first year of marriage is the hardest, I think you have no idea. My endocrinologist recommended I follow up with annual scans for 5 years. Just a precaution, he said, nothing to worry about. I remember at my first annual recall being surprised when I lay down in the scanner to find myself crying. The smell, the